Hey guys! Tonight we step into the chill of dawn across a vast, whispering desert where the sand gleams faintly under the first sliver of sunlight. You trudge out of your simple bedroll, the coarse fabric scratching your palms, and you notice the horses already shifting in their stables, restless, as if they too understand the journey ahead. You probably won't survive this, at least not comfortably, if you underestimate the desert's silent insistence. But that's okay, because you're not alone, just the way the Mongol couriers would have been centuries ago. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I like imagining where all of you are, scattered across the globe while we drift into this story. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch beside the smallest fire you can safely maintain, the orange flicker casting long, jittering shadows over sandbags and saddlebags. The air smells like smoke, horse sweat, and something faintly metallic, maybe the desert itself, warmed overnight and waiting to sting your skin. The Mongol couriers rose like this every morning, often before the sun, to check their gear. Simple leather saddles reinforced with rope, small water skins, dried meat bundles, and those long, thin scrolls that could carry orders across hundreds of miles. Historians still argue whether couriers had a formal checklist or relied purely on habit and memory. But either way, efficiency was non-negotiable. One forgotten water skin could mean exhaustion, or worse, hours before the next hidden oasis. You glance toward the horizon where the dunes ripple endlessly. Each crest is a miniature challenge, a test of judgment. Too steep, and your horse could slip. Too soft, and every step sinks you into a subtle, exhausting drag. Fringe accounts suggest some Mongols would even mark the dunes subtly at night, tiny patterns in the sand no one else could recognize, a secret breadcrumb trail across miles of monotony. Maybe it's true, maybe it's just a story to make us modern listeners feel cleverer than the writers. Either way, the thought sticks in your mind like a stubborn grain of sand in your boot. You tighten your cloak against the morning chill, feeling the cold bite your neck. The couriers didn't have the luxury of long breakfasts or heated tents. Their sustenance was minimal: dried mare's milk, a hard slab of meat, and water rationed like precious treasure. And yet, somehow, this made them faster. You sip from your small water skin and notice the dryness of your lips, the way the early sun warms the sand unevenly, the faint sound of a horse flicking its tail against a shivering fly. Humor yourself with the absurdity. Here you are, imagining yourself a heroic Mongol courier, and already your legs ache. They probably laughed at people like you. Imagine a modern city dweller trying to ride a horse across sand with only a pouch of meat for breakfast. You prepare the horses now, running your hands along their sleek sides, checking the tack, making sure every strap is secure. You hum quietly, a soft ritual to settle both your nerves and the animals. Historians still debate whether such routines were purely practical or also psychological. Did a song or chant keep the mind sharp during endless miles of desert monotony? Probably both. You sling your own gear over your shoulder, heavier than you expected, and step toward the first line of dunes. The desert is awake now, a faint wind hissing over the sand, a lizard darting under a rock, and the sun inching above the horizon, igniting the landscape in gold and pink. You glance back once more at the rudimentary outpost where you began, realizing the world you know, the village, the stable, even the familiar weight of your water skin, is already behind you. Ahead lies a seemingly infinite expanse of sand and sky. And yet, despite the hardship, the monotony, the danger, there's a strange allure. The desert is honest in its challenges, unlike the streets of any city. Fringe stories whisper of couriers who rode blind across dunes, guided only by memory, by subtle cues in the sand, by the whisper of the wind across their face. Historians still argue whether such skill was taught formally or inherited through generations. But either way, it is your task now to step into that tradition, to feel the sand beneath your boots, to sense the first rhythm of the journey. The first steps are always the hardest.
Each dune crest tests your balance and your patience. The horse shifts beneath you, and you feel its muscles bunch and relax in perfect sync with your own body. You notice a bird circling far above, a small dark speck against the brightening sky. Perhaps a raven, perhaps a desert hawk. And you're reminded that the world is alive, even in places that seem empty. The couriers centuries ago would have read these signs, mentally mapping every small signal, which way the wind blows, where vegetation clings, which hills mark hidden water sources. You squint, trying to see what they saw. Distant dunes like rolling waves, the sun reflecting in a far-off mirage, and the faintest scent of something sweet in the air, maybe desert flowers, maybe your imagination. By now, the sun is fully awake, washing the sand in a harsh light. Your cloak sticks to your back, the leather straps chafe against your shoulders, but you press on, because the Mongol couriers never lingered. They moved, they adapted, they memorized, and they endured. Remember that the desert doesn't reward hesitation. Even a single minute wasted can cost a rider hours in travel time. You adjust your gait, feeling the rhythm of horse and sand, the slow thud of hooves on warm dunes, and realize you are, if only for a moment, part of something vast and ancient. You inhale, taste the desert in your mouth, and take another step.
You trudge onward, letting the rhythm of your horse's hooves become a metronome for your thoughts. The desert stretches endlessly, a blend of gold and silver under the harsh morning sun, and you realize that memory is now your most vital tool. Unlike modern travelers with GPS and compasses, the Mongol couriers relied on an intricate mental map built from repetition, observation, and a deep familiarity with their environment. You try to commit every ridge, every bend, every subtle shadow to memory, knowing that one missed cue could mean hours of wandering, or worse, arriving too late with a critical message. Historians still argue whether the couriers relied entirely on memory or also used simple physical markers, like small stones arranged in discrete patterns along hidden trails. As you ride, you notice how the landscape seems to repeat itself. Dunes curve in familiar arcs, low ridges jut out like landmarks, and occasional patches of hardy desert grass break the monotony. Fringe accounts suggest that some Mongol riders carved tiny marks into rocks or tied tufts of horsehair to sparse bushes, secret signals only readable to those trained in their subtle language. You squint at a lone stone jutting from the sand ahead and can almost imagine a courier centuries ago brushing it with a finger as a silent message to the next rider. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's just a story meant to make us modern listeners feel clever. Either way, it adds texture to the landscape you must now navigate. You sip sparingly from your water skin, feeling the dryness creeping into your throat. The mental effort of memorizing routes combined with the heat and constant motion is exhausting. You hum under your breath, counting dune crests as your horse dips into soft sand. A tiny joke crosses your mind. If the Mongols had Snapchat, they'd have documented every ridge and bend with emojis instead of carvings. Yet the absurdity doesn't diminish the seriousness of the task. Every bend of the dune, every glint of rock could be a crucial landmark, a turning point in a journey that could span hundreds of miles. Your eyes scan the horizon constantly. You notice the faint shimmer of heat waves rising from the sand, creating ghostly duplications of dunes. You resist the urge to follow a mirage. It has trapped more than one inexperienced traveler over the centuries. Fringe sources suggest that some couriers developed an almost supernatural ability to detect mirages, reading subtle differences in color and shadow to tell real water sources from illusions. Historians still debate whether this was skill or simple luck repeated over generations. You adjust your focus, letting your peripheral vision take in distant ridges, the faint outlines of dunes, and the subtle curves in the sand, every feature a piece of the mental puzzle. At times, you glance down at the ground, noticing small tracks left by desert creatures, lizards, beetles, and even small mammals. Couriers may have used these animal tracks as navigation cues. Historians argue whether they were reliable indicators or more of a coincidental bonus.
But you notice yourself doing the same, imagining the tiny footprints telling a story of water, shelter, and safe paths. Your horse's hooves crunch over the dry sand, a satisfying rhythm that keeps you grounded while your mind maps the terrain. You realize that every movement, every glance, every quiet observation contributes to a system of knowledge that modern travelers could scarcely imagine. As the sun climbs higher, the desert shifts from cool gold to glaring white. You adjust your cloak to shield your neck, feeling the sweat begin to bead along your forehead. Your horse flicks its tail to ward off an insistent fly, and you hum a soft tune, something your ancestors might have sung to maintain focus during long stretches of monotony. Historians still debate whether such rituals were purely psychological or if they also improved physical endurance, and you decide that it probably worked on both counts. You note every subtle ridge, every bend in the dunes, every glint of rock. It all becomes part of the invisible map you carry inside your mind. Remember the fringe stories of hidden carvings? You spot a slight notch in a distant rock, barely noticeable unless you're paying attention. Your heart skips a beat with the thrill of discovery, imagining another courier centuries ago doing the exact same thing, brushing their fingers over the stone to mark a turn in the desert. Historians still argue about the prevalence of such markers. Some claim they were widespread, others dismiss them as rare anomalies. Either way, you're grateful for the idea because it gives structure to the otherwise overwhelming emptiness. The heat is climbing, and you realize the mental strain is as taxing as the physical exertion. You repeat dune patterns to yourself like a mantra, counting the number of dunes and valleys between one oasis and the next. Fringe psychologists suggest that shamans once taught riders meditative techniques to maintain focus, though scholars remain skeptical. Either way, you hum quietly, feeling your body and mind sync with the desert. Each hill and dip, each shimmering mirage is now a thread in the mental map you are weaving. Hours pass, and the desert shifts subtly. Colors change, shadows lengthen, and your brain begins to fatigue under the endless repetition. Yet with every mile, you gain a deeper understanding of the environment. Memory becomes a tangible tool, not just an abstract skill. You start to recognize patterns, the curve of a dune that signals a hidden valley, a patch of grass that hints at nearby water, the distant shimmer of a hill marking a safe path. You are in effect training yourself to see the desert not as endless sand, but as a map made of living cues. By late morning, your mental map has expanded considerably. You are aware of every subtle undulation, every line of shadow, every tiny change in the sand's texture. The Mongol couriers relied on this skill to deliver messages across vast distances, often under extreme heat and threat of bandits or wild animals. Fringe accounts suggest some riders even memorized star patterns and shifting sun angles to cross featureless terrain, a skill historians are still unsure how to validate. You pause briefly, looking at your horse's sweat-dappled flank, and feel the weight of understanding. Navigation here is not about technology. It's about total immersion, acute attention, and a certain stubborn courage. As the morning wears on, you notice your surroundings in new ways. The dunes ripple like waves frozen in mid-motion. Tiny rocks glint in the sunlight, and faint distant tracks suggest other life moving through the desert. You adjust your pace, feeling the rhythm of your horse beneath you and the soft crunch of sand underfoot. Memory is no longer just a survival tool. It is your companion, your guide, and, in a strange way, your friend. You realize that the Mongol courier's success was built not only on endurance, but on an intimate, almost symbiotic relationship with the land itself.
By now, the sun sits high, glaring down relentlessly, and you begin to feel the desert's true temperament. Your throat is parched, your muscles taut, and the rhythm of horse hooves becomes both a comfort and a challenge. You sip water sparingly, tasting every precious drop as if it were liquid gold. The Mongol couriers endured these conditions daily, often riding from dawn until well past the afternoon without a proper meal or shade. Historians still debate whether their astonishing endurance was more a result of diet or the careful pacing of their journeys. And you can see why. It is both and neither, a combination of survival instinct, conditioning, and sheer stubbornness. You reach for your dried mare's milk, chewing slowly on the crumbly chunks, noting how it tastes faintly sweet but also strangely salty. Fringe accounts suggest that some couriers carried mixtures of herbs and fermented milk, meant to stave off dehydration and maintain stamina. You're skeptical, but take small bites anyway, feeling the energy trickle back in tiny, almost imperceptible waves. The desert is merciless, but it teaches a kind of slow, focused efficiency. You conserve energy, you ration, you think in measured movements, and you learn to tolerate discomfort. The heat waves distort the dunes around you, creating mirages that ripple like liquid. You catch yourself leaning toward one, thinking it might be a distant oasis, only to remind yourself that the desert's illusions are legendary. Fringe theories claim some couriers developed a sixth sense for mirages, trained to discern subtle variations in light and shadow that betrayed the illusion. Historians are still skeptical about this, but it is hard not to admire the ingenuity if it were true. You squint, trying to read the landscape without letting your imagination betray you, and rely on what you know from memory. Each ridge, each bend, each tiny patch of grass tells a story. You glance down at your horse's hooves as they sink slightly into soft sand, the steady crunch mingling with the dry whisper of wind. Observing the horse closely, you realize it is an extension of your own survival. Every flick of its tail, every shift in its gait, every subtle movement of its ears tells you something about the terrain, the hidden hazards, and even the approaching weather. French reports claim that some riders sang or hummed to their mounts, a calming ritual, though skeptics doubt it had a measurable effect. You try it anyway, low hums vibrating against the horse's neck, feeling a surprising sense of rhythm and mutual understanding develop. As the afternoon stretches on, the desert seems to expand, pressing against your senses with its uniformity. Each dune blends into the next, yet you recall the mental maps from this morning and rely on them with quiet pride. The Mongol couriers memorized such patterns, the curve of a dune signaling a water source, the way a shadow moves across a rock to indicate the cardinal direction, even the subtle scent changes in the wind hinting at vegetation or hidden streams. You feel the weight of this knowledge settle in your mind, a practical wisdom born from necessity rather than theory. Your stomach aches slightly, not from hunger, so much as the lack of variation. One joke passes through your mind. If you wanted a desert meal, just call it sandy crunch with salt garnish. Despite the humor, the monotony is a real challenge to mental endurance. Couriers often had to fight creeping boredom and mental fatigue as much as physical exhaustion. Fringe theories propose that shamans once guided riders through mental exercises or chants to maintain focus, though historians are divided on their effectiveness. You find yourself humming quietly, counting hoofbeats, letting rhythm and repetition act as a meditative shield against fatigue. A sudden glint catches your eye. You look up and see a distant mirage or maybe a shimmering heat line, a reminder that the desert loves its illusions. You force yourself to judge based on memory and experience, calculating distances and angles. This is survival on the move, constant assessment, minimal waste of energy, precise navigation. The Mongols excelled at this, blending acute observation with experience, endurance, and a relentless drive to succeed. By late afternoon, your water skin is nearly empty, and the sun's intensity is shifted to a harsh white glare. The horse pauses occasionally, sniffing the air, shifting its weight, and you take these moments to breathe, to stretch slightly, to acknowledge the desert's persistent lessons. You realize that survival here depends on pacing, not speed. Push too hard, and both you and the horse suffer. Move too slow, and the day's heat becomes an invisible opponent. You adjust your rhythm, feeling the horse's muscles loosen under your careful touch. Mirages ripple again on the horizon, tempting your eyes, and you shake your head, laughing softly at yourself for even considering them. The Mongols developed a profound mental discipline, able to distinguish illusion from reality while maintaining physical effort. Fringe accounts suggest some couriers trained using mini-mirages or trick paths to hone this skill, a mental rehearsal that seems absurd but effective. Historians still debate whether such exercises were systematic or anecdotal, but you cannot deny the logic. Repetition breeds familiarity, and familiarity breeds survival. Hours merge into a slow continuum.
Sweat matting your hair, your muscles coiled but functional. You realize that movement itself is sustenance. The rhythm of hooves, the motion of the dunes, the faint whisper of wind across the sand. You focus on each step, each breath, internalizing patterns in the sand and sky. Survival is no longer an abstract concept. It is tangible, immediate, a sensory collaboration between you, your horse, and the desert itself. The Mongols knew this intimately, and you are beginning to understand why. As the sun dips slightly, creating long shadows across the sand, you catch sight of a low ridge in the distance, a subtle change in the terrain that your mental map tells you marks the approach of a hidden spring or shade. Fringe legends suggest that some couriers could literally feel water beneath the sand, reading tiny temperature or moisture cues. Historians remain skeptical, but the idea fascinates you. You ease your horse forward, adjusting pace carefully, savoring the subtle relief of direction and discovery. You feel both the strain and the rhythm settling into a meditative cadence: movement, observation, endurance. By late afternoon, your body is tired, your mind alert. You sip the last of your water, chew the final bit of dried milk, and glance around. The desert has taught you something intangible: patience, attention, adaptability. The Mongols mastered survival on the move, not through brute force alone, but through harmony with their surroundings. Fringe or fact, the combination of endurance, strategy, and mental mapping allowed couriers to traverse hundreds of miles with astonishing reliability. You let your eyes roam, absorbing dunes, rocks, and shadows, and feel the desert fold into your awareness.
The sun now leans westward, casting long, flickering shadows across the dunes, and you notice a subtle change in your horse's gait. Its ears flick constantly, nostrils flare, muscles tense and release with each step. You realize that understanding your mount is as crucial as reading the desert itself. The Mongol couriers were legendary not just for their endurance, but for their uncanny ability to communicate with their horses, interpreting every subtle shift in movement, every flick of a tail or ear as a vital signal. Historians still debate whether this was taught through formal training or developed instinctively over years of riding, but the effect is undeniable. A courier in tune with his horse can anticipate challenges long before they appear. You hum softly to the horse, a low vibration that seems to calm its shoulders and neck. Fringe accounts suggest some riders sang specific tones to maintain rhythm and morale for themselves and the mount, though whether the melodies were sacred, practical, or just comforting is up for debate. You can almost imagine a rider centuries ago, lips moving silently to a song only they and the horse could hear, bridging two living beings into a singular rhythm across the shifting sands. The desert seems to respond, the dunes melting into each other, the distant horizon a promise of both danger and discovery. You adjust your grip on the reins, noticing the way your horse's hooves leave precise, temporary impressions on the sand. Each step communicates weight, direction, and timing. Observing these cues becomes a sort of quiet meditation, forcing you to slow your mind even as your body works tirelessly. Fringe lore even claims that couriers could read horses' subtle reactions to predict sand conditions ahead: a slightly softer patch, a hidden ridge, or a thin layer of loose grit. Historians remain skeptical, but in this moment you feel a deep connection, as though your mount and the desert are collaborating to guide you forward. You glance down at the horse's flanks, slick with sweat, noticing the sheen of exertion and the rhythm of its breathing. Your own muscles ache in mirrored motion, a synchronous dance of endurance. The Mongols often had multiple horses, swapping mounts to maintain peak performance over long distances. But you are alone with this single creature, learning to read its subtle signals. Each twitch, each shift, each flicker of movement is a word in an unspoken conversation. Humor drifts into your mind. Imagine modern GPS giving you advice on hoof pressure. It would be utterly useless. The desert around you seems to expand infinitely, each dune blending into the next, yet your horse's reactions give you micro hints: softer sand ahead,
a hidden ridge, a slight depression that could conceal water or an obstacle. You adjust your balance accordingly, shifting weight to guide it without overt commands. Fringe reports claim that some Mongols even sang to their horses during sandstorms, the sound acting as a beacon or reassurance. Historians remain divided on its efficacy, but the ritual's presence alone speaks volumes about the bond between rider and mount. A light wind picks up, carrying fine grains of sand across your face. You instinctively lean slightly forward, letting your horse bear more weight on the front hooves as it navigates the ridge. Each movement feels deliberate, a conversation between your instincts, the horse's reactions, and the subtle cues of the desert itself. The Mongols' expertise was not in brute force, but in this intimate understanding, knowing when to push, when to yield, and how to synchronize with the environment in a way that borders on poetry. You glance at the distant horizon, spotting a subtle shimmer that hints at a sand hollow or perhaps another small rise. Your horse reacts first, ears pricked, nostrils flaring. You follow its cues carefully, letting instinct and observation guide your pace. Fringe accounts suggest some riders could feel the changes in air temperature through the horse's body, predicting hidden obstacles or changes in sand texture. Historians remain skeptical, but right now it feels entirely plausible. The horse is alive with information, and you are learning to listen. As the afternoon stretches, you begin to notice the smallest details: the direction of a hoofprint, the faint depression left by a desert rodent, or the way sunlight reflects on tiny crystals embedded in the sand. Your horse adjusts mid-step, and you shift balance subtly to maintain rhythm. Humor drifts in again. If the Mongols had Instagram, this would be a post: just me, my horse, and some sand crystals. #desert vibes, #survival goals. Yet the joke doesn't break your focus, it reinforces it. Observing, reading, adjusting, this is your life now. Dunes begin to stretch taller, shadows longer, and you notice a slight change in wind direction. Your horse picks up on it first, shifting its stance as though whispering something ahead. You adjust subtly, guiding it along a safer route. The Mongols relied on such tiny cues, an almost invisible conversation with their animals to cross treacherous terrain safely. Fringe theories claim that couriers could even anticipate sand collapses by reading the horse's skin vibrations, a skill historians are unsure how to verify, but today you feel a sliver of that same intuitive guidance. The sun begins to dip lower, creating golden highlights across each crest. You take a moment to breathe, feeling the horse's warmth and strength beneath you. Its steady rhythm mirrors your heartbeat, the movement of hoofs in soft sand a comforting lull. You imagine a Mongol rider centuries ago navigating unknown deserts in a near-perfect partnership with their mount, trusting instincts, memory, and subtle signals over any instrument. It's a delicate balance of mind and body, human and animal, endurance and instinct. You glance down at the horse's ears, flicking at every tiny sound: a distant bird, the shifting wind, a subtle tremor in the sand. You adjust reins lightly, leaning into instinct, and feel the thrill of shared understanding. The Mongol courier's brilliance was not in magic or luck, but in this profound attunement, listening to the horse, reading the desert, and letting both guide every motion. Fringe stories claim that some riders even sang to maintain the rhythm, a soothing ritual for both rider and mount. You hum quietly now, a soft, meditative tune, feeling a bond develop across centuries, landscapes, and hoofs.